Today we are in Nadi Nature Resort.
Located at the foothills of Mount Batukaru in Tabanan Regency, here travelers can immerse in nature, staying in luxury glamping surrounded by a permaculture farm and waterfalls. Join us as we explore the story of founders Aishah and Puni, discovering what inspired them to live their lives in Hong Kong and embark on this new adventure.
Thank you for having us here today, Aishah.
Thank you.
Let's start with your background. Where are you coming from, and what was your previous experience?
Thank you for having me, firstly, Elena. It's lovely to be here. So my background, so just to introduce myself, my name is Aishah Fauzi, and I am the co-founder of Nadi Nature Resort and Nadi Farm Cafe in Tabanan, Bali. And my co-founder is my husband. So my background is nothing really related to hospitality. I used to be an aviation lawyer, and I was practicing as a lawyer for 15 years. And my husband was Michelin star sommelier in Hong Kong. So we met in Hong Kong when I was working as a lawyer there. And I think Hong Kong life got to us at some stage, and that's where we really wanted like a radical change, which is how we ended up here. But I'm sure we'll cover a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yeah, so why did you choose Bali?
So we chose Bali because Bali had a natural collection of people who were already passionate about sustainability, regenerative practices, and also people who were already doing projects that inspired us. So that was number one. Number two, I often say to people, we didn't actually choose Bali. Bali was obviously one of our choices, a top choice for us to move to. But in fact, Bali actually chose us.
Okay. What was another choices?
So the other choices, so my background is my dad is Malaysian Malay. My mum is from New Zealand. And so naturally, those two choices were on the list. And my husband is Indian, but grew up in Hong Kong. So India was another choice for us as well at this at the time. And we actually made moves in terms of trying to get visas in place, trying to align ourselves with, whether we could actually realistically find a piece of land and move and do various things in these different countries. Bali was actually the wild card because Bali was the only place where neither of us had initial connections to. And yet somehow this was like during COVID. So this was in 2020 when the world was turned upside down anyway. And so I think miraculously, our visa application to Bali actually came through while all the others got rejected.
Oh, wow.
And so in that sense, I can say that Bali chose us.
Okay, so and also thanks to COVID.
Thanks.
I guess.
Yeah, indeed.
Running business as a family, who is responsible for what, and how do you separate the responsibilities between each other? It shouldn't be easy.
Yeah, so it's been quite an interesting dynamic. So as I said earlier, my husband is a Michelin star sommelier, so he's had experience in hospitality, whereas for me, my background is definitely corporate. And so obviously when we first started out, neither of us had actually run businesses before. So at that stage, it was really natural that we gravitated towards the area that we knew more about. So my husband definitely took a lead in establishing the Farm Cafe, which is where we're in at the moment. And I took more of a lead role in getting us the land contract, doing the budgeting and initial, I suppose, project management to get the construction up and running, to talk to all the suppliers and get the terms and conditions agreed. And in terms of just managing timeframes and scheduling. So there was a lot more, I think, project management on my side. And from my husband, he came in at a later stage, but I think that was also because of the creative process. It requires a lot more incubation to kind of understand the direction we wanted to take. Now, surprisingly, we've now kind of turned the tables where I'm doing a lot more of the menu in the restaurant.
Oh, wow.
So most of the dishes, except for the family recipes, which are the Indian food we have on offer. I'm doing a lot more menu creation now and just kind of getting all these pieces established, because I think one of the things that I'm truly passionate about is the farm. And so this is another aspect that we've not really spoken about yet. where we also have a permaculture farm, and the permaculture farm actually connects the resort and the restaurant, because ultimately that is where our organic waste goes into. That is the environment and the surrounds that give our resort the unique selling point, because people think, wow, there's a permaculture farm around my room. That is something I've never experienced, something I want. I'm close to nature. It's productive nature because it's all edible. And so it provides like a compelling story. But then also the guests know I can go to the cafe and I can eat something that I've seen grow in the farm. And so there's this kind of connectivity that guests get beyond what they typically experience in a normal, typical, traditional hospitality venue.
Right.
So, yeah.
From busy life in Hong Kong, right, jumping straight away to the farm, opening the business without like nearly zero business experience, right, running yourself. What challenges did you experience during the pre-opening, starting the business?
Good point, and good question. So I'd say, one of the main things, and just to go back to the fact that we have a nature resort, we have a farm cafe, and we have a permaculture farm. One of the things that we didn't realize at the time was accidentally we ended up starting 3 businesses in one. So you think, it is a business with 3 aspects.
Yes.
But in fact, when you go into it further, what you realize is actually each aspect needs to be set up properly, separately.
Right.
And so that's like an accident that we hadn't anticipated, obviously being naive in business. And so when we were doing the pre-launch stage, so that final month before we opened, that was really kind of, I suppose, the big surprise for us, where we're like, oh my God, what have we done? Because you can't train your kitchen people, for instance, to make your beds. You can't train your gardeners to take orders from your guests in the restaurant, right? So completely different sections of the business that you actually have to train, you have to manage separately. We have one single P&L, profit and loss statement, but that still means that we have to kind of focus on each aspect of the business. And obviously that was like the biggest challenge at the time. So what we ended up doing was we just focused on the most important ones that we needed to derive revenue from. So that was the rooms first. Making sure the rooms were comfortable, and also the food that we served was something we were proud of. So that was like where I think we placed the most importance. The farm, we knew as much as it was a priority, just having open fields of green is good enough, but actually we did have more vision for something different. So that just had to wait while we were doing everything else. So thankfully, we've now passed our 14th month of operations. And so as you can see in the background here, there's a lot more vegetation that we've actually installed or planted. We've now got the integration of flowers, vegetables, fruits that actually comes into our kitchen and that we actually use. So the flowers, for instance, we use as garnish. None of them are sprayed. Everything's like, I wouldn't use the word organic because that's not something we can say for Bali. There's a lot of pesticides in the air and in the water that come from the paddy fields. But we don't use our own chemicals. So it's a non-chemical way of producing, I suppose. And so the flowers also get used in decorating the rooms. When people have like a honeymoon or something that we're decorating for. And again, the fruit, the vegetables, and now we're starting to get eggs as well from our chickens. So that goes into the breakfasts whenever we have sufficient supply. So that's been like quite a good way to turn the challenges around and start kind of seeing the positive come out the other end.
Well, we've been here first time in July. In July,
I remember,
and nearly 1 year later,
year,
it's completely different. I mean, the gardens.
Correct.
It gets so green, and you can hear all this buzz from the bugs and everything. It's amazing, really, how in 1 year, what a huge progress.
Thank you.
Have done. Farm to table. Since we start to talk a little bit about the restaurant and menu, what you are now in charge of developing, how did you come up with this concept? Why have you choose this? This is not the easiest one.
No.
Right? It's not you just nicely, like on the picture, picking up something
not at
yummy on the garden and put it in your plate. It's a huge work behind this.
Thank you for actually saying it's not easy, because
Yes.
it makes us feel so seen and heard. I think the general assumption is that one, farming is easy, and we see that as a bit of a global issue at the moment, where farmers are undervalued. Produce is really undervalued, right? It doesn't matter how ugly or beautiful a tomato looks.
Yes.
The fact that it took it months to grow really should be appreciated more.
Right.
But sadly, that's not where we are at yet as a global population. So I would say that for us, it was firstly, when we first came to Bali, it was just for a holiday. But we wanted something that was so different from our previous lives, our then lives, which was corporate and hospitality. And so we came and did a week-long permaculture course. At the time, it was perma what? I didn't even know what permaculture was, but it doesn't matter. I just wanted something completely different to what we were then doing. And within that single week, literally within 7 days, we went from being grumpy and lethargic and always without any energy and just like brain fog to suddenly waking up before our alarms. Our tummies were fine. We had extra energy. We were not having to kind of like steal a nap during the day or try and rely on coffee. It was just like completely different, right? I felt 10 years lighter and younger within 7 days. And we were eating food grown on the farm where we were staying for the retreat. And most of it was Balinese food. So there was a lot of coconut oil and a lot of like just freshly picked leaves, that kind of thing. And I think that's where we suddenly realized there was a different way to how we had been living. And it was possible to kind of actually turn things around in a way that up to that point, I didn't think there was another choice. I didn't think there was an alternative to what we were doing. So that then gave us the idea. And so it took us another 2 years or a year and a half to kind of come to Bali, move here, and then another year and a half-ish again to then find the land, evolve from initially thinking we were just going to grow some food for ourselves to then thinking actually no one's going to come, so how are we going to earn money? So now we have to have like a resort concept in place. So there was a whole evolution that went through this. And I think through it, the thing that really stood out for us was living in Hong Kong. There was a lot of food insecurity, not from quantity, because a lot of the most premium products and ingredients worldwide were flown to Hong Kong. Right. You could get truffles from Alba every Wednesday on a flight from Italy. You could get every single wine you wanted. White asparagus would come in from Europe. But all that Puneet was aware of because he was working in Michelin. But that wasn't the point. There was so much food wastage. There was lack of appreciation for everything. And so I think for us, having seen this, having eaten that kind of food for 7 years and just not feeling like it's the premium produce, but you're still not feeling alive. What's happening, right? Where's the disconnect?
Right.
So I think that was where we started to feel like actually that basic ingredients, all the really farm fresh, but like locally grown stuff in Bali did so much more for us. So how can we now replicate that to constantly have that as like our reality and our daily life? And so for us, it was important that we got some land that would actually support that aim, because we knew that the production of food was an important part for us, whether it was by ourselves or partnering with suppliers. We therefore wanted to be in an area that supported that and allowed for us to kind of have these collaborations. And we also started taking courses. So even though we were still back in Hong Kong, I was taking courses online in permaculture. I was watching so many videos. So now when we take like a farm tour and everyone's like, wow, you know so much, I'm like, Google. It's actually really the easiest way. And Google, thanks to algorithms, I suppose this is the only time I'm going to say this, but algorithms actually help you because they give you more of that same content, right? So then you go down this kind of like rabbit hole, which is wonderful and beneficial when it's a new subject area that you're just a newbie in and just learning. So
wonderful. With the current trends, wellness, sustainability, eco-resort in the industry and beyond is becoming a huge trend worldwide, which is good in one side. In another hand, it brings a lot of fake and greenwashing coming this way together. So where do you think this trend will lead us? For the great consciousness or the opposite, the greater greenwashing worldwide?
I think, you know, having kind of understood a little bit more about Bali, and that was again maybe the serendipitous choice for us to be in Bali. In Bali, there's a concept called Sakala Niskala, the seen and the unseen, right? Or the good and the bad, the black and the white, yin and yang, basically, right? And so the two have to coexist in that sense, meaning, yes, there's always going to be a sense of greenwashing, but again, if you look to nutrients and nutrition back in the 60s, right, and what our parents were sold when they were young and, you know, starting to kind of like buy supplements and that kind of thing, now we know that not everything they were sold had truth to the claims being made. And I think there's a certain element to that will always exist in any kind of human existence, where people say one thing, but it's not necessarily aligned. And so I think the real battle that we have, or also the challenge, but also like an opportunity that we have, is to make sure that what we say and what we do and what we produce is actually aligned. And so just taking example, I'll give you both examples, right? The farm cafe first. You know, when we say farm to table, that means that even if the ingredients is more expensive, we will actually buy the more expensive farm ingredients that supports the ethos of farm to table. And farm to table, or farm to fork as we like to call it, also relies on something known as being hyper local. And so that means that you're conscious of the carbon footprint that you have, and the carbon footprint of every single ingredient that arrives at the table, right? And so we will actually prioritize local suppliers, and local suppliers doing it well, right? Even if from a price perspective, it's not the volume-based discounts that you would get elsewhere. And I think we also believe that there's enough people out there who appreciate that and really are looking for that authentic product. And so for them, they will come and they'll see our prices, even though we're in Tabanan by Jatilui, our prices are probably on par with Canggu, not more. Because if you go to a hotel in Nusa Dua, it's way more, like 21% more, in fact. But here, our prices are just what you would pay in a cafe in Canggu, and so are our portions. But that means that we can actually pass on that price point, essentially, to the supplier that is willing to supply us for a product that has integrity. And so that matters, right? And so that's number one. Number two, what we use in our resort. So we have 4 rooms at the moment. They're all luxury glamping tents. Again, locally made, but with a Dutch design aesthetic. So that's been something that people have really loved. And you've been a guest, so you've seen this in action. But you know, you'll see different touch points in the room. And one I'll particularly mention is we use a brand of toilet paper called Tissoo, Tissoo, right? It's a local brand, and it's the first tree-free toilet paper brand. Now, what does that mean? It means they use bamboo, and bamboo is actually a grass, not a tree. And that's why they're not using tree pulp from a forest and cutting down like trees that have much more value in different ways, rather than being toilet paper. Whereas bamboo as a grass can grow fast and is renewable as a resource. So having this toilet paper, we're probably paying maybe double for what you'd pay for toilet paper per single roll. And that's a lot of toilet paper rolls a year. But what it does is we actually have the packaging and it's wrapped in paper. Now that paper already tells a story. So when someone comes into the room and they're using the toilet paper, now they can actually see that it's already advertised. And we don't have to keep telling a story, because they will see all these different brands within our room that already align with the ethos of what we're trying to do, which is regenerative tourism, regenerative hospitality. And so I think just the environment that the guests are in when they're here already speaks for itself. And that's where we try and be as authentic as possible. In saying that, though, one of the big challenges we have, just going back to an earlier question you asked, is a lot of people have this they assume that maybe we use solar power, maybe we use turbines, a lot of this new technology which people consider to be eco. Now, a lot of this technology at the moment, especially in a place like Indonesia, is very prohibitive because it's not subsidized by any of the governments or any of the organizations that are trying to kind of campaign for more sustainable practices. And so where that leaves us is having to kind of find our own methods that can work. And so we're having to prioritize at the moment. I would say that we don't use any of this technology, but we do other things like responsible waste management, for instance, to counteract what we're not yet able to afford to do. And I think the baseline, just in terms of what we're doing and what everyone else can do as well, is just start somewhere. You don't have to do everything perfectly, but what we need is 4 billion people doing sustainability and regeneration imperfectly.
Right. Just you mentioned about the toilet paper. I just have a numbers in my head popping up. That's like, with the occupancy of only 26 people in the one of the place we're managing, we're using up to 200 rolls per month.
Exactly. That's a lot of toilet paper and a lot of plastic if you're not using the right.
It's a lot of like we buy in the huge bulks, but still it's a lot. Costs what the business quite often have to bear. This is, I think, quite concerning because sometimes you want to do good, especially for the small and medium businesses who don't have a lot of extra budget coming from the management companies, or a world chain. You want to do sometimes, install the solar batteries, install the rainwater collection. You want to use all the locally sourced products, but the cost of them are going to be in the room cost, right? So for me, the big concerning thing is that this is wonderful. There is more and more company going towards this direction, but the company who still can afford this are like higher, medium, luxury segments only. So how to bring it to the smaller businesses is still quite a big question. But thank you for doing this. I mean, it's already a huge work, and just to start small, it is already quite a big thing. Where do you see the hospitality in Bali in 10 years with all the development? What is happening now?
If you don't mind, I'd love to reframe that question and say, where would I like to see it in 10 years? Because I think we anyone can kind of read some of the news that's already in the media at the moment in terms of what we're currently seeing in Bali, whether it's from the plastic waves that come into the beaches, right? From the currents pushing it from other parts of Indonesia and Asia. Or whether it's the over-tourism, or whether it's the lack of water due to mismanagement, or even stretched resources such as traffic, right? So this is all something that we're currently already seeing. What I would like to say is that in the next 10 years, we're going to, and we are already actually starting to see that change in consciousness. And I would say that even our conversation today is proof of that. So I think that there's already a movement which is encouraging dialogue in terms of what sustainable tourism should look like. And actually, I want to go beyond sustainable tourism, because sustainable tourism is actually the wrong phrase really for what we're experiencing. Sustainable means holding at the current level. We don't need this current level. Like this is actually, we need to fix and improve this. So what I would suggest is we need regenerative tourism, right? Tourism that actually improves and makes the situation better than before the tourists actually came, right? And so that is something that's a bit of a fine balance to achieve, because when there's so many people who are foreign to that place coming into that place, obviously it will change it somehow. That is inevitable. But what we can see is that, and we see this even with our resort, 80% of our workforce are under 25 years old. All our staff are actually from the region of Tabanan. And so we do a lot, going back to that point of being hyper-local, we do a lot with local community members and, the people who are actually native and, from this place, right? And I think in seeing that, there's a lot of hope that I have with my young workforce, especially because the under 25s, they have a different attitude. They've grown up with their phones. They've grown up watching YouTube, watching things online, knowing that there's a different language out there, a different culture, many cultures out there, there's opportunities, etc., right? A lot that they can actually seize as an opportunity if they really wanted to. Now, one thing that at the moment we see is for a lot of these young kids, they have to leave their homes and their villages and go and work elsewhere to get those opportunities. So what we're doing here is we're trying to give those opportunities locally. And it goes to things like practicing your English, learning different cuisines, interacting with all these new interesting people from around the world, right? And so many more opportunities. And we try and support scholarships for those that we look at as having potential and the hunger to learn. So there's a lot that I see as positive, because when they have this experience, when they've had these touch points where it inspires them or it makes them understand that, hey, there's a problem that this business is trying to solve. Subconsciously, I hope that it affects them and their choices that they continue to make. And so in 10 years, they'll be fully in the workforce, right? In 20 years, hopefully they'll be in leadership. And so I'm really hopeful that whatever small difference we're making today will somehow then have a larger impact in their conversations and their actions in the future.
Making permaculture sexy again.
Again, it always was.
Again, because I feel like a little bit of a problem that young people seeing all this beautiful, exciting life through their phones, and they starting feel like what was their grandparents doing, right? Being very connected to the land. Most of the Bali is other fishery, right? Other agriculture. What their parents or what their ancestor was doing is a little bit out of the place now, so they kind of have another priorities, how to back them to the land.
Exactly.
Right? Because this is exactly the people who are going to continue.
You're right.
And Bali have a lot of beautiful practices, right? Which
You're right.
was traditionally used for ages here.
Correct.
Do you feel it's a lot about the community building, not only as a business owner, but as a travelers ourselves?
I think culture plays a big part in it. And even in our transition where we moved here from somewhere else, we're not native to Bali culture, right? And so for us also, just understanding that the people who've really thrived in Bali, in everything they do, are the people who have embraced and tried their best to understand the culture. And I think this is that magnet that attracts a lot of people to Bali firstly, right? Because Bali is such a culturally interesting place. It's also culturally very strong and magnetic. And so from a physics perspective, having the volcanoes and that kind of attraction, it pulls a lot of people to it. But then people don't really know how to articulate what is pulling them. And so what we see is like this magic of nature, which has been woven into hundreds and almost thousands of years of their culture, is the perfect combination for those loving and wanting nature and also wanting a dose of culture and something, hate the word, but exotic, right? And I think what I like to see, and thankfully a lot of practices now I feel are moving away, is from the commercialization of culture for the sake of it, right? So you see where certain places will have dancers coming in and doing something that is just like for tourists to take photos and videos of. I'm not really a fan of that. Like, again, each to their own. Obviously, it does have an appeal for a certain sector, and sometimes for children, right? Like that is something more appealing given in a certain package to help them understand.
Yes.
But I think nothing really beats the experience of being able to experience something more authentic, or being able to discuss and ask questions of like a local Balinese, about any things you see that are fascinating on the island. Your driver, your waiters, waitresses, your housekeepers, like everything, right? And so I think having businesses take responsibility for being custodians of culture is super important. That's number one. But custodianship actually has to come from aspect number 2, which is respect. Because without having that respect, you cannot really preserve and be a custodian. So I think firstly you have to be able to understand what you're looking at.
Right.
Not fully understand, right? Like you'll always be an outsider, but just appreciate. And then from that point you can start to kind of say, what of my guest experience do I want to give, which helps them experience and feel this culture a little bit better. And so one thing that we've done, it sounds really small and subtle, but actually it's done a lot for us in the sense that we have nasi goreng on the menu. Nasi goreng is fried rice, and everyone has it, right? Every single restaurant, hotel, warung, you name it, they have it. Nasi goreng, staple dish of Indonesia. And so for us, what we've done is we've actually made our nasi goreng so that it uses red rice. Now, the red rice is grown 15 minutes from here in Jatilui, right? So that's specific to Bali. It's a Bali heritage. The nasi goreng for us also comes with a type of sambal called sambal goreng. It's local to this area of Tabanan. So we first tried it with the people we now call our Balinese parents, the people who actually were kind enough to help us transition into Bali life. And so the ibu kade used to always cook this sambal goreng, and they had to have it at every single meal, right? That's not something that other people from Indonesia have necessarily experienced. So when they come, we get a lot of comments, even from locals. It's the best nasi goreng they've ever had, and that sambal was addictive. and so, we nasi goreng being so common, but we're trying to like weave back some of the ingredients, some of the ways of cooking, some of the dishes or aspects and elements that make this place, Angsari, the village we're in, Tabanan, the region we're in, relevant to that dish. And then the third thing about the nasi goreng, just quickly, is a lot of people who eat it, especially the locals, we tell them after they've finished it, it was purely vegetarian. They don't believe it.
Oh, really?
Because typically, see, even you're surprised.
I've been going to try nasi goreng.
Because it was, like typically nasi goreng has egg, and nasi goreng has like chopped chicken. Right. And that's what typically everyone thinks makes it tastier, not vegetarian, right?
Masako.
But
Masako.
Exactly. So that's what we've done, right? And it's subtle. But in a way, it's kind of our campaign to be as hyper-local as possible and to bring things back to what reflects the culture of the place we're in, right? And so that's just one small example that I'm giving you today.
This is a wonderful example because this is what I really fascinated about, like sometimes you see this is a place or this is just a nasi goreng, what can be special about nasi goreng? But when you know the story behind of the nasi goreng, I think it's double the taste, it's triple the feeling and the overall experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And you coming for this experience, you're not coming just for nasi goreng or just for staying in the room.
No.
Right? You're coming for this experience and for the stories.
Exactly.
To be heard and then to be told to someone else. Aishah, what would be your outcome, I think, from living in Bali, making a business here? After now being here 2 years, a little bit more.
4 years, actually.
4 years, sorry. Right, because you started to build and everything. After being here for 4 years, how do you feel about the place?
I think Bali will always have a sense of home for me, just because it's allowed us to kind of put on our training wheels as entrepreneurs and ecopreneurs for that. And just kind of really delve into something. So it gave us like a protective environment, but it also gave us like that clean slate to just try something completely new, experiment, be creative, and learning to trust our creativity. Because I think being in a structure like, say, traditional hospitality or even corporate, it really desensitizes you from knowing when your creativity wants to come out. And so being able to come to an environment where creativity is so celebrated and embraced here, and learning again to trust and reopen a part of us that we've probably not been into since childhood, right, for most of us, has been like a wonderful experience. And it's almost like we've kind of been born and grown up again, right, in a different way. And so I think for me personally, and I know for Puneet, my husband as well, our big aim is that what we're doing here becomes a legacy. So we don't have our own children, but for us, we feel that somewhat this business is our child, right? We've birthed it, we've kind of like nurtured it and continue to do so. And whatever that looks like in the 10, 15 years ahead of us, we're not attached to. But I think what we do is like our trust in the fact that we're here at this point right now is enough to kind of open up amazing opportunities for us, allow collaboration with many, many people, you know, all of whom are inspirational and fabulous like yourself, and continue to do so, right? So that is what we're excited about in the future. But in fact, what we also see that there are challenges that are going to come up in the future where in 10, 15 years, for instance, climate change is going to be a big feature of our business. And we don't even know how that's going to affect all of us collectively, but also as a business, we're starting to see that because from our capital expenditure perspective, it's gone up much more than what we expected to do, having now been operating the business for 14 months. A lot of the capex we're spending is actually due to climate change issues that we're already facing. So
rains.
Yeah, rains, floods, landslides, drought. You know, we've actually been hit by both this year, floods and drought.
Okay.
And that just tells you how much, and actually a typhoon as well.
Yeah.
So that's in the space of about 8 to 10 months. So that tells you how the next 10 years and beyond may look like. And I think being aware allows you to prepare. That's what I would say.
Where are your clients mostly coming from? Others local expats, people who's just visiting Bali for the short time. I personally visiting you for escape.
And that's what we love.
Yes.
So mainly our guests are from Europe. I would say about 65 to 70%, depending on what season, Europeans. And we also get a lot of staycationers, so people like yourselves, expats who are already living in Bali and just want to get away from the normal centers where most of you guys are living. And Tabanan now is kind of developing into this place which is like the new Bali, but also the real Bali, right? So that's been really wonderful for us to kind of be able to help people see a different side of Bali, maybe a better side of Bali in that it's still untouched somewhat. And so, yeah, so we develop our offerings just because I think even people who've lived in Bali a while, like yourself, maybe there are aspects to it that you may not be aware of, right? And regionally, things are different as well.
Right.
So somebody who's aware of Bukit and Uluwatu may not know what's happening up in Tabanan region, right? And the cultures here. So we're basically devising different products and experiences like cooking classes and even like spice tours, that kind of thing, because a lot of the spices are grown around Bedugul, which is about 15 minutes from us. So super exciting, super close by on our doorstep. And being able to kind of share that with, you know, not just like people who are coming to Bali for that tourist experience, but also sharing it with people who've maybe seen a side of Bali for a while, but something new for them.
I feel like living here for a long time, you're starting to forget in what environment you're living in and see all the beauty.
Exactly.
You know, you're planning the trip somewhere,
Exactly.
but you actually have so many things unseen here still. How our listeners can support your business?
I think with any small size business and new business as well, I think a lot of it goes towards just the support from, you know, like you vote with your wallet. Yeah, that's the first thing, right? Like, because the only way a small business can grow is if they're able to sustain themselves. And I think when people talk about sustainability, sometimes people forget that sustainability also has to be financial sustainability and financial regeneration. So in fact, to be able to earn enough that we can actually invest back into certain things, right? And that is true regeneration. So I think firstly, it would be don't be afraid of seeking out the unusual products that you see in the market. Even if it's a small company, even if it's just starting out, support them. Because that is the only way that they can get better, that they have the funds and resources to actually get bigger and improve and, you know, do what they're doing well on a larger mass scale. So that's number one. And then number two, I think don't be afraid to ask and engage, right? Because there is nothing more rewarding for us than when someone is interested in what we're doing and wants to kind of know more and wants to have the conversation. You know, like we love when people ask us about what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. So that's a way that small businesses can really feel seen and heard. And the third and final, and I think you appreciate this as well, with everything that we're doing, reviews, right? Like spread the word, spread the word and spread the love and pay it forward. So yeah,
that's true.
Simply that.
Can people just visit Bali for the farm tour and the lunch without staying here?
Yes. So we actually are starting to get a lot of people who are just coming to Tabanan. So we've got like a really famous waterfall called Leke Leke Waterfall. We've got the rice fields, which are UNESCO protected, and they're all about between 15 to 30 minutes from our resort. So we're starting to notice a lot of people just coming to us for lunch or dinner, depending on what they're doing and when they're in the area. So you do have the opportunity to experience our farm to fork food. And get the experience of being on the farm, because in front of the cafe is part of the farm that you can just explore and walk through and see the streams and the fish and what have you. So yeah, we're open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. And you know, you don't have to book, just turn up. And you know, you can also go and see our rooms while you're here. So when we have a room available, we always are happy to take our dining in guests down to see
For a
the
small
rooms.
tour.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Aishah, thank you very much for today's conversation.
Thank you.
It
Thank
was
you,
very
Elena.
interesting to dig a little bit more and know the story behind your beautiful business.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Really
very much.
appreciate it. Sukma.